U.S. Election 2024. There will not be an inevitable bloodbath because migrants are not animals. In my professional travels to war-torn countries like South Sudan, I have witnessed the precursors to mass crimes. Here in the USA, I am seeing them once more. Here are a few things I noticed then, and a few things I am seeing now. South Sudanese forces opened fire on my close American colleagues multiple times as we drove past the president's mansion on July 7, 2016, while I was a diplomat assisting with a peace accord in South Sudan. Within a few hundred yards of our complex, rebel and government forces from South Sudan fought for the following 4 days. After the battle subsided, to celebrate their win, over 100 South Sudanese fighters broke into another property that housed our partner organizations. There, they went on an hour-long spree, robbing, shooting, and raping the individuals within. When it came to humanitarian aid, the attack was a first. Hate speech increased throughout South Sudan after that conflict. My coworkers and I spent many hours in Washington, D.C., thereafter, attempting to piece together what had transpired, reviewing the red flags, and considering potential solutions to the unexpected surge in violence. A group of my evacuated teammates and I went on a field trip to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum so that we could learn about the Holocaust and take action to stop future tragedies. Experts on preventing genocide made the case that such atrocities do not occur out of the blue. Similar to what was going on in Germany a decade prior to the Holocaust, there are red flags. More recent studies have examined the historical context of mass atrocities, which are characterized as widespread and systematic acts of brutality against people, and we learned about these studies. Scott Strauss, an American political scientist, has been working to find warning flags, which we learned about. Another thing we picked up is that systematic brutality against civilians may happen anywhere. When I compared the events in South Sudan in 2016 to Strauss's warning indicators, I concluded that ethnic cleansing was very much a possibility. At the time, no one was mentioning it, but the UN issued a comparable warning a few months later. Things that have been happening in the US in the past few weeks bring to mind the red flags I noticed in South Sudan. While there are many ways in which the United States differs from South Sudan, I am hearing from more and more professionals who share my growing concern. Alexander Hinton, a professor at Rutgers University and the UNESCO Chair on Genocide Prevention, penned the book It Can Happen Here in 2022. Political polarization is one of the well-known indicators. The United States of America's political parties have grown more closely associated with particular ideologies, racial identities, and religious affiliations in the last several decades, according to research from the year 2020. This has led to a more pronounced increase in political polarization than in a number of other prominent democracies. Affective polarization, in which people feel more unfavorably toward other political parties than their own, is a phenomena that social scientists from Stanford and Brown have deemed as extraordinary in the United States. The use of apocalyptic hyperbole by some leaders is one of the other red flags that has recently become increasingly noticeable. Trump, while campaigning in Ohio on Saturday, threatened a bloodbath if he were to lose the next election. His real goals become more apparent when you consider his overt claims that American democracy would probably end if he loses and the evocative word he used to describe economic collapse. Trump must either have a strategy or his statements are empty hyperbole. We must not overlook the fact that numerous individuals found guilty of offenses connected to the Capitol uprising on January 6, 2021, have said that Trump, and likely his statements, were the catalysts for their actions. And that's hardly all the red flags. Trump again dehumanized migrants on Saturday, making it harder to feel sorry for the other and easier to rationalize violence against them. This kind of discourse is a crucial step in preparing the ground for mass tragedies. The media, later found guilty of crimes against humanity, sowed hatred in the years leading up to the 1994 Rwandan genocide by constantly referring to the targeted minority group as cockroaches. "Young people have been in jail for years," was the most harmful remark Trump made about immigrants during his weekend rally in Ohio. They are people, if you can believe it. Calling them persons is a term I'm not familiar with. Sometimes I just don't see them as persons. This is a wild animal. To top it all off, there is little evidence to back the claims made by the alt-right information ecosystem, which is popular among MAGA supporters, that criminal immigrants and members of foreign militaries pose a serious threat to the United States. Another red flag is the formation and deployment of irregular armed troops. Leading the charge on January 6 were the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, who would subsequently face charges of seditious conspiracy. It is conceivable that Trump might provide more resources to state-led hybrid armed forces like the Florida State Guard and Operation Lone Star in Texas in order to help with migrant cases. In order to pay for the transportation of immigrants across the nation, the Texas group is already soliciting private donations. Despite claims that it is only involved in humanitarian work, the Florida Guard is under investigation for allegedly giving its members paramilitary training. The alarming stockpile of weaponry in this nation is another cause for concern. In every state in the United States, firearms are easily accessible. About 120 firearms are in the possession of civilians for every 100 people living here, as reported in the Small Arms Survey. This is more than double the rate of the next highest country, Yemen, which has been involved in armed conflict for years. It's also about 10 times the average rate of gun ownership among countries with more than 1 million citizens. The number of Americans who can lawfully carry a concealed handgun without a permit has also increased exponentially following a Supreme Court rule in 2022. Partisans might easily find the means to attack civilians if they so desired.